Hello everyone and welcome to our podcast, a roundtable discussion where we hear from the voices of the UK private equity universe on the issues affecting them right now. My name's Leigh Webb, I'm Head of Private Equity Sponsored Coverage at finnCap Group, and it's a pleasure to be your host for today's conversation. Now, it's certainly not news that ESG, environmental, social and governance commitments, is an important driver of growth amongst our SMEs. That said, in recent years, finnCap Group is witnessing more and more how ESG is inching its way up priority lists across the business spectrum. Indeed, we released our own ESG handbook and scorecard designed to help our clients with their policy making. The greater focus on ESG today represents a widespread response to challenges people across the world are facing. Investors on the whole are paying close attention, and institutions are increasingly and noticeably wanting to place their money with funds that are ESG-centric. So with all of that in mind, my question to today's panellist is, are we all impact investors now? Sam, I'd like to kick off by asking you a question, if I may. Why are we at finnCap putting ESG at the forefront of our thoughts, and why do we feel it's so important moving into 2021?
Thanks, Lee. So I think for us, responsible growth has always been something that has been important to us. It might not have been called ESG 13 years ago, but when we did our original MBO, it was all about culture and having a different culture. And for us, that meant putting our people first, it meant putting our clients first, and thinking about things more broadly. So alongside profit, you were thinking about other stakeholders as well. And what we considered, and what I certainly considered, that was really just doing the right thing. And I think now the term ESG almost embodies that. You know, what is doing the right thing? Are you thinking about things, the wider society, your clients, your suppliers, your people, and how does that move your business forward? So for us, it's fundamental. It's been fundamental to our growth, and it's fundamental to us moving forward. But the question, why now? I think post-COVID, it's put business and businesses' impact on society in a whole different experience. It's been at front and centre of most people's minds, and I think the money has also followed that, and we've seen lots of inflows into impact and ESG funds. So I think what's important is consumers are driving this, people who want to work at your firm are driving this, funders are driving this, and it just means, I think, now a more human response is required, where you are authentic, your purpose is important, what you believe in is important, and driving the right sort of behaviour is important. So ESG is probably now not just the environment, but I think the S has become a very big thing post-COVID. What is your impact on society? Why is that important? What do you stand for? And I think where businesses and companies are coming unstuck is where maybe they don't, it's become a box ticking exercise and it's not really embedded in your culture. So we feel it's a mega trend. We obviously launched the scorecard to help small and mid-cap quoted businesses help report on this and thinking about it. But this mega trend, as all things when there's huge disruption and huge issues in the economy, mega trends are accelerated.
Can you tell us some real world examples of how you're seeing ESG creep up investors' priority lists? Carl, can I come to you first?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I think, as you know, we've raised over £1 billion now over the last 20 years for various sustainable and impact strategies from investors. But without doubt, there's been a complete explosion of interest in the last few years. And it's not just from the early adopters, it's pretty much from everybody that we speak to. So there's real interest, there's far more diligence, there's far more comprehensive questions around what do you mean by impact, how do you measure impact? And I think the biggest thing has been this transition from it's no longer considered a risk mitigation tool, it's very much seen as part of the value creation strategy. And I think in addition, another stakeholder group that's increasingly interested in this space is management teams as well. They want to partner with somebody that shares their values. They're increasingly excited about the idea of it being able to create value. And I think LPs seeing that dynamic has seen their interest dramatically increase in this space as well.
Okay, thanks, Carl. And Tristan, is this across the board, or has there been an overriding lean towards one particular ESG policy or set of policies that driving investment decisions right now?
I mean, I'd echo that that ESG is moving up the priority list, and I'd say that the investor lean is towards ESG across the board rather than one specific area. I think all major investors are talking about it, whereas it was a tick box exercise. It's now it's very much a conversation with GPs about how they're using it for value creation. And as Carl said, when diligencing a fund manager, they want to understand how it's embedded within their processes to do so. And I think we're also seeing increasing levels of investor interest because some of them are raising their own dedicated ESG or impact funds or setting aside allocations specifically for our space. But I suppose within that general leaning towards ESG. I think currently the biggest theme is the transition to the net zero economy. I think there's most investor focus and funding in this area, and I think that's partly through their own drivers and those are their investors, and it's in part actually through greater scrutiny on them. Both their consumers and regulator requirements in terms of operating sustainably and setting emissions targets and reporting and requirements to report. But my sense is that's actually a really encouraging position. That regulatory driver around climate actually should drive real opportunity within PE. You'll have seen recently the announcement to bring forward EV requirements, so to phase out petrol and diesel by 2030. If you think about the supply chain implications of that, well, fantastic. From a PE perspective, that should drive a huge wave of entrepreneurialism, which I think will be our next wave of opportunity.
Thanks, Tristan. Really, really interesting. So James, Westbridge is a signatory of the UNPRI. Why did you make that decision, and what did you implement as a result?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. I guess just slightly stepping back, we're a growing lower mid-market investor, and responsible investment is increasingly becoming important across all asset classes, and I guess no matter the size of the manager. And so, as we've discussed, there's a growing realization that responsible investment does go hand in hand with value creation. So we took the decision to become a UNPRI signatory. Really to evidence to investors and our wider stakeholders that we are taking responsible investment seriously, even with quite a lean investment team. And we look to build on this platform as we grow and as we grow our funds under management, as we make an impact on more management teams and future investors. So in terms of what we've done over the last 2 years, we've really looked to upgrade our responsible investment ESG policy internally and roll out a number of initiatives. We now track a number of KPIs across all our portfolio companies. We publish a few of those on our website now. We've bolstered our processes when it comes to ESG diligence, pre-investment. And so now, I guess, instead of something that would traditionally sort of get a bit more airtime during the fundraising process, ESG now flows through all areas of our investment business, and we're gathering more and more data to evidence this positive relationship between responsible investment and strong investor returns.
And I think we have been very open with them on this front to make sure that it's brought to the board table on a regular basis. I think that there are more and more, not obligations yet, but there's more of a momentum around reporting specific KPIs that are measurable. But we've been impressed, to be honest, to the extent at which the pull, if you like, is already there from within management teams on the detail. So within this trend towards sustainable investing and appreciating what that means at every level. Just as an example, one of our businesses has rebranded in the last couple of months, and the MD was very proudly telling me the other day that the sort of COVID secure masks that they've all had with the logos on have been produced from minimal environmental impact materials, and it's a mindset thing that everybody at Alcuin encourages our management teams to adopt.
But back into 2016, Bridges won the BBCA Responsible Investment Award for ESG leadership. What did that mean to you, the business, and what did you see as the sort of knock-on effect over the last sort of 3 or 4 years?
I mean, one of the things that awards do is they draw attention to some of the excellent initiatives that are going on. So since 2016, Bridges has hosted the Impact Management Project, which is now a global movement bringing together a number of different stakeholders from across the sector to try and develop, effectively common language and common framework around impact. We want to get to kind of generally accepted standards, which is increasingly important, because otherwise companies and investors can call impact anything really. And it makes benchmarking and assessing performance quite difficult without that common language and common framework. So it should enable the industry to scale quite dramatically.
Michael, so a question for you here. Have your ESG policies changed over the last year? And indeed in the wake of sort of COVID, has that had any impact at all?
Yeah, so I think again, so Equistone is continuously trying to improve our efforts in ESG, and I think in the last year, this year has been an unusual one, because obviously we've all been in lockdown for most of 2020. And in terms of our policies and how we've changed things, I think one of the things that we've tried to do is make sure that ESG is embraced across the broader firm. So what we've done is we've implemented a new ESG training for all of our deal executives. And the idea around that is, at a lot of firms, ESG sometimes is siloed into certain groups where, it might be certain members of the firm who are looking at it, or you have a dedicated ESG person and that person is responsible for it. And what it means then is that sometimes, people can just say, oh, well, I don't need to deal with that because these guys are going to deal with it. Whereas what we're trying to do is make sure that the entire firm understands it, understands, the value creation you can do from it, the value preservation that's involved. And these trainings are meant to give the entire firm the same view, the same ethos in terms of how we look at ESG. And whilst we're not a dedicated impact fund, we want the whole firm to understand the same views. And so that training is something that I think will be important. And then going forward, we've also implemented an ESG committee, which is again trying to broaden out the amount of people who are responsible for ESG within the firm.
In terms of communicating to investors, how do you demonstrate the value of ESG as created in the business, including your own?
Yeah. Yeah, as you say, we've been on our ESG journey since sort of 2010, and I think, as with most of the industry, it was probably risk mitigation to begin with. But we see it as far more than risk mitigation now. Not just doing the right thing either, but actually, we do see it as a really big value creation opportunity. It's one of the reasons that we raised our impact fund. I think that's not just in terms of these businesses with strong ESG practices building resilience, but value creation from cost savings through simple things like LED implementations and water monitoring, and but through to social policies around ensuring people have development plans to be more engaged, to reduce churn, to reduce training costs and such like. So we see that there's an opportunity with almost every single ESG thing that we do for it to drop through to the bottom line and ultimately therefore be positive in both environmental or social terms, but also financial terms. But for us, the key really is to demonstrating this by doing outcomes focused reporting. I think far too many ESG initiatives don't deliver their aims because they're not tangible. So for us, we start during the investment process with an assessment of ESG, and actually the business doesn't have to be great around ESG to begin with, but they have to show a real willingness to improve and go on that journey. And we'll do a baseline of the performance with them. We'll identify opportunities and projects that we can work on, and we'll identify KPIs and ways to quantify ESG as best we can. And then we'll monitor it and we'll manage it and we'll report it to our investors. And I think that reporting side is really important. So every year we produce an ESG report that goes out to all of our investments. We cover every single one of our portfolio companies, what they've done in the year, the KPIs and how they've moved and hopefully improved, and what they're planning to do next year. And we'll put some case studies in there to hopefully help bring that to life and potentially inspire some of their own actions. And obviously we'll also produce an annual PRI report and do some specific reporting. But I guess I come back to it. For us, the key really is outcomes focused reporting. Being very clear on what we're trying to achieve and reporting against that.
How can PE funds better prove to investors that they're delivering on their ESG commitments?
Yeah, I think genuinely we've talked about LPs driving much of this change. However, I do think there is a window of opportunity, especially in the lower mid market, where GPs can help drive this ESG agenda with their investors and deliver an ESG strategy and output that's over and above the commitments set out in any investor agreements. I think this includes us working a bit harder to show in pound note terms where ESG has driven value and what key risks or value creation areas have been driven by our ESG strategy. And an example for us, when we started out 2 years ago to sort of upgrade this ESG strategy, we went to our LPs to discuss what they thought was best practice, and a number of them came back and said, we're still working that out. Can you do the work and come back to us and tell us what you think is best practice? So I think there is a window of opportunity where GPs can sort of overperform whilst sort of formal investor commitments catch up.
For me, it's about accountability. So do you do the things that you said you're going to do? And a number of the speakers have all talked about things that they've done. At Bridges, we do similar things. We identify the data points that we think will drive impact value, but also commercial value. We measure them, and then we aggregate them at company level to fund level, and we do a report. But I think it's about accountability, doing what you say you're going to do, and consistency of delivering against those outcomes. And also, if you can make the case that impact indeed drives commercial success, then a great way to demonstrate it is by delivering a financial return to your investors as well.
In which sectors or types of companies does the future growth lie? And what does a sustainable future look like in the PE world? So if I can kick that off with Tristan, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd have to say I am optimistic about the future. I think that the tipping point has been reached in terms of both impact and ESG investing. It's one of the reasons we raised our impact fund, because we see a great opportunity to deliver some great returns as well as doing some good work. And I think why do I say that? I think on the environmental side, I think there's close to universal acceptance that action's needed. People talk about the green recovery, building back better. These are very widely accepted positions now. I think on the social side, increasingly companies and individuals are making buying decisions based on the value set of companies and the practices of those companies. And I think that means that there are tailwinds across a number of sectors which sit within the ESG and impact areas.
Going back to that point I made earlier, around some of the sort of smaller growth companies may feel a little bit of fear if they're being measured on these bases and so on. What is it that you're looking for from these management teams? Is it the direction of travel? Is it the mindset and the culture? And what can you as GPs do to really accelerate that journey so that you can all look back 3 to 5 years later and think, this has not just been a successful investment financially, but this has also really accelerated that journey in terms of ESG that company was on.
And Sam, lastly to you, is there anything that you'd like to add before we close out?
I think we see it. I think someone said we see it across every sector where ESG is there, whether it's societal impact, whether it's tech disruption, achieving goals. It is everywhere. And from the listed side of things, it's a bit later stage. We're seeing it more in the private arena, which is where we want to get more involved. But no, I just think it's great to hear that everyone is championing it. And I think the pace of change is going to be probably like nothing we've ever seen quite before.
Brilliant. Thanks, Sam. I think that's probably a great place to end. Been a sort of eye-opening discussion, and want to thank you all for contributing. Really do appreciate it.